Welcome back, Canonites. While more than a little behind what I was originally shooting for, it's finally time for my in-depth breakdown and analysis of Halo Infinite. This series will be a multi-part one like my previous breakdowns, diving into the full story of Halo Infinite, from before it starts until its ultimate end, and wrapping up with a Q&A to address any lingering questions y'all might have. Today we begin with part 1 of this series, covering the events leading up to the start of Halo Infinite's campaign, or more specifically, covering the events up until Master Chief is discovered by the pilot. Much of this information is sourced from the audio logs, so I'll have the audio log sources on screen as the information is presented. Starting with part 2, we'll be diving into the real meat of the campaign, and in between entries of this breakdown series, look forward to some extra videos dedicated to certain topics that warrant deeper exploration. For the moment, however, let's begin our dive into the story and lore of Halo Infinite. While Halo Infinite opens with the UNSC Infinity coming under attack by Atriox and a host of banished dreadnoughts, the game's story and audio logs slowly reveal a sequence of events that precedes the game proper. It is with these that we'll start telling Halo Infinite's story, beginning with the end of Halo Shadows of Reach. On October 7th, 2559, the Spartan 2s of Blue Team, John 117, Fred 104, Kelly 087, and Linda 058, deployed to Reach to recover 3 cryo bins and a lockbox from the ruins of Dr. Halsey's lab. The cryo bins contained cloned brains of Dr. Halsey, leftovers from the creation of Cortana. In the months to follow, at least one of these brains would become the AI known as the Weapon. At the same time, the Banished had already been operating on Reach, searching for a portal that would allow Atriox to return to the Milky Way after being stranded on the Ark in Halo Wars 2. On October 12th, as the UNSC was wrapping up its operations, the portal is discovered and Atriox returns. Both the UNSC and Banished soon depart from the system, their activity having attracted the attention of Cortana and her guardians. In the months to follow, both groups would keep busy. On board the UNSC Infinity, its military personnel would continue anti-created operations, while Dr. Halsey began work on the smart AI who would become the Weapon. Born from another cloned brain of Dr. Halsey, essentially making her Cortana's sister, or a copy as the game puts things, the Weapon would be, similar to her predecessor, an AI unlike anything before it. Where smart AI typically select their appearance and name, the Weapon at least never got the latter opportunity. The Weapon would have many of her processes locked down, and was implanted with a termination code that could be activated by the Master Chief. Meanwhile, Atriox was seemingly confronted by Cortana, demanding the War Master's and Banished's allegiance to the Created. When Atriox refused, Cortana destroyed the Geralhane homeworld of Doisak. When Cortana reached out to Atriox isn't made clear in the game. It's not impossible that she reached out to Atriox while he was on the Ark, though Halo Mythos informs us that certain failsafes were keeping Cortana from accessing the Ark. More likely, I think, is that Cortana reached out after Atriox had returned to the Milky Way. In the end, though, it doesn't matter exactly when the two talked, as the destruction of Doisak is what pushes Atriox to do what he does next. With his homeworld gone, Atriox now has 2 main goals: defeating Cortana and establishing a new home for the Banished, both of which he intends to accomplish via the secrets of Installation 07. This part isn't detailed too much in the game, but during his time on the Ark, Atriox discovered some important information about Installation 07, seemingly on the Silent Auditorium itself, if not the Endless, based on dialogue between him and Cortana later in the game. By December 12, 2559, the UNSC Infinity was underway with final preparations for its mission against Cortana. The Galactic Overlord was operating on Halo Ring Installation 07, aka Zeta Halo, searching the ring's vast secrets. The plan for the UNSC would be to deploy the AI known as the Weapon to the ring, and being essentially a copy of Cortana, she'd attract the Overlord's attention. The Weapon would then trap Cortana, and an automated protocol would delete the Weapon. Finally, Master Chief would retrieve the now contained Cortana, returning her to Infinity for deletion. On board the Infinity, everyone was ready to go. While Infinity can house over 18,000 people, it only holds a bit over 7,000 at this point, potentially to avoid unnecessary casualties should the worst occur. These forces are largely military but include civilian volunteers such as Fernando Esparza. 6 Mulsanne-class frigates, the new frigate class introduced in Halo Infinite, also accompany the Infinity. We discover via the audio logs that Spartan Locke is off-ship at this moment, performing the next stages of Operation Breaker Trip, an operation that was being prepped at the same time as Operation Wolf, aka Halo Shadows of Reach. I'm hoping one of the first pieces of campaign DLC for Halo Infinite will be a dive into Breaker Trip, but for now, we can say with confidence that Locke was not on board the Infinity when the ship was attacked. This does leave the question about where Hyperius found the Hunter-class Mjolnir that adorns his armor, and I have a couple theories about that which I plan to flesh out in a Theorycraft video very soon. For now though, I would wager that either Hyperius and Locke met sometime in the 14 months between Halo 5 and Halo Infinite's opening scene, or Hyperius found the armor among the debris from Infinity. And that's assuming that this is indeed Locke's armor at all. However, we can say with certainty that Locke isn't dead. He's alive, he wasn't even on Infinity when shit went down, so to those who were or still are concerned about that, rest assured. And to those who actually wanted him dead, what the hell, y'all. Anywho, we're additionally informed that Fred 104, Kelly 087, and Linda 058, originally meant to accompany the Master Chief on his mission, were redeployed by Captain Lasky after Halsey decided John would deploy alone. Halsey apparently had other plans for them, though we don't find out what those were. Like with Breaker Trip, I imagine, or hope, campaign DLC will dive into what Blue Team were sent to do, and possibly what Halsey had intended for them to do. Meanwhile, Atriox gathers a large force of banished dreadnoughts, massive ships capable of mass fabricating deployable bases and ramming other ships. These ships would allow him to take out the UNSC Infinity and capture its weapon against Cortana, then establish a new home on Installation 07. We're told in the game that Atriox wanted to attack Infinity to capture the weapon, though it makes no indication that Atriox knew the weapon was an AI. On Installation 07, Cortana detects the approach of the Infinity, knowing her John to be aboard. And here is roughly where the opening of Halo Infinite actually begins. As Infinity is waiting for the deployment of the weapon, the Banished attack, 3 dreadnoughts ramming into the supercarrier and Banished forces boarding soon after. At the same time, additional Banished forces attack the support frigates that accompanied Infinity, while simultaneously dropping occupation forces onto Zeta Halo. For anyone curious how Infinity lost, this is basically it. Not only did the Banished get the drop on the UNSC, they came with overwhelming firepower. From Infinity's bridge, Lasky orders the immediate remote deployment of the weapon before being escorted to safety by Master Chief himself. Eventually, Chief and Lasky come across Spartan 4 Fireteam Taurus. The captain's safety is left to the Spartan Fireteam, while Chief holds back Banished forces in the hangar bay. This is about where we meet Chief in the intro cutscene, and we know what happens from there. The Chief and Atriox meet, Atriox wins, and the Chief is left to the vacuum of space. It's interesting, ever since Atriox's introduction where he single-handedly hands the Spartans of Red Team their collective asses, there's been wide speculation about how the Chief would stack up against the Banished War Master. And the first thing Halo Infinite does is answer that question. While that's happening, Fireteam Taurus successfully evacs Lasky. Interestingly, you can actually see a Pelican fly past the Chief in the opening cutscene, and I'd like to think that this might actually be Lasky's evac dropship. Anyway, as the captain begins his journey to Zeta Halo's surface, he orders the evacuation of Infinity and provides rendezvous coordinates before his message suddenly cuts out. Lasky is almost certainly alive, though whether he made it to Zeta Halo's surface remains to be seen. After securing the captain, Fireteam Taurus and the rest of the Infinity evacuate. Among those evacuating is a volunteer civilian engineer, Fernando Esparza, who decides to hide away in a Pelican, hoping to be overlooked by the Banished. Fireteam Taurus are the first to land on Zeta Halo and immediately go to work eliminating local Banished Gorespike AA cannons. Other Spartans engage with the Banished any way they can, such as Nina Kovan purposely crashing right into a Banished Phantom on her way down to the ring's surface. Spartans and other UNSC survivors continue fighting against the Banished on Zeta Halo into the next day. Meanwhile, Atriox heads to the Silent Auditorium, where he encounters a trapped and surprised Cortana. Cortana had fallen for the weapon's trap and been sealed within the Silent Auditorium. Inside, Atriox reveals that the UNSC forces in the area have been defeated, including the Master Chief, and leaves Cortana to reflect on her actions while he studies the Silent Auditorium. The two seem to talk a couple more times before Atriox asks if Cortana has made her decision. In her reflection, as she faced her end, Cortana devised a plan to open a path for victory for the Master Chief. She undid the deletion protocols of the weapon, crafted messages for the Chief to find, and finally, destroyed the Silent Auditorium, buying time for the Master Chief to appear. When this happened, Zeta Halo was also moved to a new spatial region, dragging with it any remains of the UNSC and Banished fleets in the space nearby. Whether this was Cortana's doing or the Halo's emergency slipspace protocols kicking in as a result of Cortana destroying the Silent Auditorium, along with a good section of the Halo, remains unclear. For that matter, what Cortana did to destroy the Silent Auditorium isn't detailed that much. We get a description of events from the Ringfall series of Spartan audio logs, which detail an intense light and noise coming from the Silent Auditorium.
What is that?
It's coming from that tower to the north. Taurus! Sitrep, now! We're green, sir. But everything except for my armor is down. Must have been that blast.
A huge blast of energy spreads from the building, knocking out most electronics and tearing the ground asunder. I don't know about anyone else, but this energy blast reminded me a lot of a Guardian's attenuation pulse, which I only mentioned due to the fallen Guardian that you can spot on a section of Zeta Halo. As we never see a Guardian during the opening cutscene and one is never mentioned in any audio logs, I wonder if there was a Guardian sealed away on Zeta Halo and if that's what Cortana used to destroy the Silent Auditorium. A bigger point to take away here, I think, is how Installation 07 moving frames the rest of the game. In pre-release material and even in-game, we hear about the UNSC being defeated and the Banished winning. And while this is true to a degree, it's more accurate to say that the UNSC suffered a significant loss at Zeta Halo and, cut off from the possibility of reinforcements following the ring's jump, had little chance of mounting a significant resistance. The UNSC is still around and operating in the wider galaxy, as seen in the opening for the Academy, though the loss of the Infinity was significant. In the weeks to follow, Spartan Makovich would find the remains of the Mulsanne-class frigate Mortal Reverie, which became the central base of UNSC operations on the ring. Many Spartan forwards, including Griffin, Makovich, Sorel, and Stone, helped set up Reverie Base and lead UNSC survivors to it while continuing anti-Banished operations. At the same time, the Banished expand their control of the ring, setting up the outpost Riven Gate to essentially trap UNSC forces in Banished territory. Near the end of January 2560, Spartan Griffin leads a group of 5 Spartans to assassinate Escharum. The mission, however, turns out to be a trap, resulting in the death of Griffin's team and the Spartans' capture, while the Reverie is annihilated by an attack force under the command of Tremonius. Before being captured, Griffin manages one last transmission, a warning, but it isn't enough. On February 2nd, 2560, the Reverie falls, becoming Banished Outpost Tremonius, and within a month, the last UNSC forward operating base would fall to Banished control. With little other choice, the surviving Spartans declare Rubicon Protocol, meaning their only goal now is to stop or delay the Banished. While that's happening, the Banished continue to establish new bases and take further control of the ring. Annex Ridge studies the mysterious stone rings, the Forge of Tish was established as a maintenance depot, and the Horn of Abolition would be used to broadcast propaganda and track down UNSC signals, to name just a few. Surviving Marines are captured and processed at places like the Redoubt of Sundering before being delivered to Checklock's tower for interrogation. In order to deal with surviving Spartans, Escharum forms the Hand of Atriox, a group of skilled killers tasked with hunting down and killing the remaining Spartans on Zeta Halo. Spartan Sorel is known to have fallen to the brothers Tavares and Hyperius, and Jega Ardamni killed both Spartan Stone and Makovich. Sometime after the establishment of Outpost Tremonius, the Harbinger's Silex was discovered and dug out. A captured human combat medic named Lucas Browning would be used to free the Harbinger, after which he was briefly a guest of Chek Lok, before finally being handed over to the Harbinger herself. Harbinger reveals to Lucas the history of the Forerunners and humans, secrets of the galaxy both known and unknown to fans, enough to drive the poor medic to shambles, leaving him a shell of his former self. Elsewhere, Banished forces continue to study Zeta Halo and its myriad of artifacts. In particular, a Sangheili named Kiar Yaham, working with the Kig-Yar Dak-Ra, discover a series of data streams revealing some of the ring's buried history. Among other secrets, these particular audio logs reveal the truth behind one of Installation 07's numerous secrets: why it orbits a rocky and watery world rather than a gas giant. If you aren't aware, Halos typically orbit gas giants, such as Installation 04 orbiting Threshold or Installation 05 orbiting Substance. Recently, in Halo Point of Light, it was revealed that this was done to avoid the chance of sapient life evolving near a Halo ring. Installation 07, however, orbited a planet that had the potential for life to evolve. As it turns out, this planet was the Zalanin homeworld, or at least heavily implied to be. Following the activation of the Halo Array 100,000 years ago, 117-649 Despondent Pyre accidentally discovers the Xalanin and moved Installation 07 into orbit near their homeworld, where it seemingly remained until it was moved once more in Halo Infinite. Following the fall of the Reverie, Spartans and UNSC operations would continue on Zeta Halo, with Marine forces scouting out Banished infrastructure, seemingly under the command of one First Lieutenant Floyd, a name that appears many times during the UNSC Outpost Intel audio logs. Much of these audio logs essentially set up stuff encountered during the missions, or explain how certain non-critical events went down. For example, we can see at the Banished Outpost Horn of Abolition, the main base for Banished propaganda, that the base had come under attack before, a landslide covering much of a building and even what appears to be an old broadcast tower. In addition to their contents, each audio log includes a description. While many of these aren't much to write home about, the UNSC Outpost Intel does tell a secondary story through its descriptions, one of a UNSC survivor, codenamed Pointer, investigating the various Banished outposts and making their own observations. When they reach the Horn of Abolition, this individual notices that the attempted destruction of the outpost, while unsuccessful, left the base fairly vulnerable. Because of this, Pointer is able to piggyback on the Banished signal and broadcast their own message, one that they hope will be received by codename Fixer. Fixer is a name that has appeared a few times in Halo, often in the background. Fixer is known to be a member of the Office of Naval Intelligence, and during the created Crisis, was attempting to confirm data from Operations Kickstand, Breaker Trip, and Wolf. We don't know much about Fixer, but the fact that another operative is attempting to reach them is rather interesting. On the Banished side of things, we can see from the Banished Outpost intel that they were no slouches in the months following the fall of the Reverie, or at least Escharum took great efforts to ensure work continued. Working with the newly awakened Harbinger, we can hear that relations are beginning to strain, many Banished skeptical not only of the Harbinger herself, but of the Skimmers, or Gaskira, as well. As the month of May comes to a close, Spartan Tomas Horvath makes one last transmission, a message for any UNSC forces that might remain in Banished-controlled territory. He notes that he's headed up Spin to search for more survivors, and closes with a hope that the Master Chief might soon appear. Almost as if by providence, it would only be 2 days later on May 28th that a lone human survivor discovered the legendary Spartan floating in space. And that, for now, will conclude our first episode. Hopefully, if nothing else, this gave a clear sense of the order of events prior to the game's opening, and some of what happened in the 6 months John spent as a Chief Sickle. Naturally, let me know in the comments below. Look forward to some smaller Theorycraft-style videos between now and Part 2, where we'll be diving into the first sections of Halo Infinite's campaign. Until then, this has been Halo Canon, and I'll see y'all next time. Thank you once again for watching Canonites. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, maybe even share it around, both of which help the channel. And if you aren't subscribed already, consider becoming a fellow Canonite and hitting that notification bell so you won't miss any future videos. Halo Canon now has a Discord server, which you can find linked in the description box below. If you like discussing any aspect of Halo's lore, well, that's what we specialize in. Thank you all once more, and keep on being awesome.